Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the Constitution, the law, and the events of today to you each month. Good evening, welcome to Law Talk. Mark, what are we covering tonight?
Well, we have the kind of a historical thing. It's the Crimean Purchase.
The Crimean Purchase, but I thought Crimea belonged to Ukraine.
Well, let me, in the interest of full disclosure, we didn't have anyone to come in and debate us on this issue tonight, and some of our studio crew do think this is a crazy theory. But what we have here is that from 2009 to 2013, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. And then in March of 2014, March of 2009 was the reset, the Russian reset, the perestroika.
No, the perestroika.
Perestroika. And
well,
so,
that's why she pressed the reset
the reset button.
Yeah,
right.
we're all going to reset.
Okay, and then 2014, a year after she was no longer Secretary of State, or a couple of months after she wasn't Secretary of State anymore, even though there had been some separatist action about a year before that, Crimea was annexed by Russia.
Well, actually, what happened is, if we follow along, Crimea had been having separatists revolt for over a period of time, and then it turned out that the separatists sort of overthrew the provincial government somewhat in Crimea, and the Russians had to go there to help. Right. The separatists that really belonged in Crimea, and so it should belong to Russia.
So they were really saving the world.
They were saving the world.
They were saving the world.
But I understand our Secretary of State was there to help them save the world.
Well, okay. Well, here's kind of an interesting thing. There was when the Ukrainians had, separated from the USSR.
Correct.
They had nuclear weapons.
Yes, they did.
And so there's a treaty between the U.S. and the Ukrainians and the Russians that if Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, its territorial integrity would be respected.
And that means that the country would remain under its own self-autonomy,
the borders
and not be controlled by Russia or the U.S. or Poland or any other country around it.
It basically meant that if Russia invaded, the U.S. would attack.
Well, wait a minute. Are you telling me that the U.S. had promised Ukraine to protect it from Russia?
Right, if they gave up their nuclear weapons.
If they gave up their nuclear weapons.
And so that was the deal then.
But what happened to the deal?
Well, there's just a couple of coincidences. If you look back.
A couple of coincidences.
If you look back at the Alaska Purchase in 1867.
Seward's Folly.
Seward's Folly, okay. What happened then, that was actually during the Crimean War.
That's unique.
And that was when Turkey and Britain and France were fighting with Russia over the Crimea, and Russia had Alaska, but they were afraid the Brits were going to sink the Russian ships, so they couldn't really, support Alaska anymore, so they had to do kind of a fire sale to the U.S. That's why we got such a good deal on it.
Well, actually, they called it Seward's Folly at the time, but in reality, he paid pennies for acres or thousands of acres.
It was $7.2 million in 1867, which is probably worth more now.
Yeah, of course it is. But the question is how much we've gotten from Alaska. What they didn't know now, or then, which they do know now, is that oil is so abundant in Alaska, you can literally drill anywhere and you're going to find an oil well.
Back in those days with steel pits. But now we have the Crimean Purchase, but this time we got $131 million. The United States was paid, or Secretary of State.
Whoa, who was paid?
The Secretary of State was paid.
The Secretary of State was paid. Why
paid.
would she be paid? She's not. She didn't own the Crimea.
Well, yeah, but I think they worked out some kind of deal.
Who worked out the deal?
It was a mining tycoon named Frank Giustar, and he owned a company called Uranium One. And a lot of people will say that, well, that's just a front for the Russian government. And
well, his name sounds like a good Irishman.
And he also did some deals in Kazakhstan and a couple of things going over there that the U.S. was involved in. And so he gave $31 million to the Clinton Foundation, and then also there's $100 million that he didn't give the Clinton Foundation until they found out that he did.
Oh, so wait a minute. You just covered a lot of ground there. First of all, is this a deal that went through the U.S. government?
Well, it was a deal that went to the Clinton Giustra, I think it's, how do you say it? Giustra Sustainable Growth Initiative was $100 million, but that was never reported.
Oh, but that wasn't reported.
Because it was all done in Canada.
Oh, it's done in Canada.
But then
was the IRS there?
No, IRS wasn't in that one.
Was
But I
Lois
think-
Lerner there?
But I think there's going to be a refiling this time. There's a little refiling.
There's
now.
supposed to be a refiling
But
going
anyway,
on.
so basically,
Well, wait a minute. How do you get away with $131 million donated to your foundation and nobody reports it? And
Well, no,
funny enough, the Secretary of State is the wife of the foundation.
Well, the funny is, the 31 million I think was reported. The 100 million just kind of popped up.
Oh, that just popped up.
Inadvertently.
But wait a minute. What was the
And
deal?
now they have
actually?
to refile the. Well, the deal was that they get a bunch of uranium.
A bunch of uranium.
But it's just kind of a coincidence that Crimea just gets like and then Eastern Ukraine gets kind of like and there's 140 million. 140
Okay,
million.
wait a minute. Time out here for a second. What we're talking about is you're saying that, from what I understand from the story, 20% of the uranium that belongs to this country's natural resources was sold
to Putin.
Through this organization in Canada, and it was orchestrated by the Clinton Foundation.
Well, that's where the money went.
Oh, that's where the money went.
That's
but
how they
we
laundered
don't
the
know
money.
who orchestrated it, right?
No, we don't know. I'm sure it was all for a good cause.
And wait a minute, isn't that when Russia formally invaded Crimea?
Well, like I said, that was all about the same time. That happened on February 28th, 2014. It was annexed.
Oh, annexed.
But the activity had been going on for a year or so before that.
Well, I got a question though. Can I annex your house?
Well, if you pay the right people 131 million,
I guess I can annex anyone's house.
No, but what's kind of interesting about the Clinton Foundation is that they say there's disagreement about these numbers, but there's reports that about 10% of the money that goes to the Clinton Foundation goes to the helpless and the needy and the poor person.
But what about the 90%?
And the 90% kind of goes for overhead. And
Oh, that's
expenses
overhead.
and salary. And it goes, what's the guy, Sid Blumenthal?
Yeah,
okay.
Sid Blumenthal.
Sid and all those guys, they get pretty good salaries.
I guess so.
And about 10% goes to help the needy, and about 90% goes to the overhead.
Well, I also understand
but
that Stephanopoulos actually donated $100,000, and he's a newscaster, and he pretended like he had never done that until he was caught.
He forgot about that.
Oh, he forgot that he gave $100,000 to
and
the Clinton Foundation.
just like they forgot to report the 100 million.
Oh, yeah, what's $100 million?
What's 100 million? Between friends.
Between you and the IRS,
between
there's $100 million.
Between the Russia and the
You know what's funny is that people donate $100 million to me all the time, and I never have to report it.
I forget about it.
You kind of forget about it.
Now, the Red Cross, even though I think they just got in some trouble the other day, 90%.
The Red Cross?
But 90% of what the Red Cross takes in, it goes to the poor person. And
allegedly.
Yeah, that's what they say. But and 10% goes to overhead. But in the Clinton Foundation, it's flipped over. 90% goes to overhead. But they have high overhead because they have to fly around. They've got who's the daughter? She flies
Chelsea.
Around. Chelsea flies around.
Oh, well, Chelsea's got to fly.
They got Sid Blumenthal. They've got a lot of people that they have.
Well, they have a big entourage.
They have a big staff. They have a lot of friends.
They have a lot of friends.
That are
and
employed.
I also understand it was all those friends that the emails vanished.
Oh,
when Miss Clinton was Secretary of State.
Well,
wasn't those are the ones that vanished? All those friends.
The deal,
like the Russians and the Canadians.
The deal President Obama made with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is that she couldn't use.
Blumenthal.
You couldn't use Sid.
Yeah, because Sid was actually the main person that dug up dirt on President Obama in 2008.
Yeah, he was an antagonist.
So he said, so the president doesn't like Sid very much.
So the State Department couldn't hire him, but instead he was hired
by the Clinton Foundation.
By the foundation, and he ends up that he was kind of her chief of staff while she was Secretary of State, but she was a personal friend.
Oh, personal friend.
So those emails were all deleted because those were all personal.
Oh, those are all personal emails.
And then
were they all talking about Chelsea's wedding?
And then Frank Giustar, he was a personal friend, so that $100 million got deleted.
Yes,
and anything with the foundation was personal.
And anything about Crimea being turned over to the Russians in a trade-off with their uranium is all personal.
Well, it's kind of like grandkids and weddings and hairstyles.
How can you keep track of all that?
Well, it's personal stuff. Nobody wants to be bored about what's going on the sewing bee and
the sewing bee.
The sewing bee and the hair color and stuff like that.
I got to tell you something.
So you just delete that stuff.
Why don't we take a look at the map where we're talking about if we get the opportunity? I know that we've talked about this briefly, but there's Ukraine, there's Crimea in the south. And Russia, as you see, is what effectively is to the east of Ukraine. And from what I understand, everything on to the right of the main river through the Ukraine is basically Russian. And now they have Crimea. So in reality, you're trying to tell me that Russia sort of controls half of the Ukraine right now.
Well, there probably be, it's kind of a, there's kind of an effect, you're also looking at, Poland, because Obama withdrew the missile defense from Poland, and you've got Latvia and Lithuania. So
And Romania.
so you're
Moldova.
So you're looking at a lot of countries there that are kind of poised to be under.
Well,
under
what's kind
Russian
of what's
domination.
sad about that is right next to the
So
on
that's
the other
actually-
side,
that's
right
a
next to
pretty good-
Poland, it starts looking at Austria and Germany.
Yeah, but no,
Isn't
but
that a little close? It's starting to sound a little bit like World War II here.
No, but it's only but $131 million. That's pretty good money, So they got some money for it.
But
So
I have a
that's not bad.
question.
That's not bad.
Are they going to have to pay taxes on that?
Well, I think they're going to refile when they discover the $100 million that was missing before, that they forgot they got.
Oh,
it.
they forgot the 100
They
million.
forgot they got it, and they forgot to give away.
Yeah,
to
of
Crimea.
course they forgot.
Okay, now they're going to refile their taxes.
But how do you file when you're a tax-free organization? You're not paying taxes anyway.
You still have to. You have to file.
You see, I still have to file.
Well,
but the problem I have is
but
at
they have to
100
refile.
million.
Yeah, that's not that much.
And-
That's nothing compared. That's like one speech.
Oh, that's a speech.
That's a speech.
But I
of-
understand the Clintons were broke when they left the White House.
Well, they're not so broke anymore.